Hello, everybody. Welcome to Headwaters Special Live Lunch with a Scientist today on Giving Tuesday. Before we get started and I introduce today's guest, I just wanted to say we are so excited to be able to bring you this live presentation on Giving Tuesday. Headwaters has such a supportive community, and truly the generosity of both our donors and the willingness of fantastic scientists like Carly really help to pass on what scientists are learning throughout their careers to all of our budding student scientists. And you have all made programs like this and the rest of Headwaters programs possible for us to provide free of charge to teachers and classrooms and really bring scientists to students directly. And so I would love to introduce everyone to Carly, the Science Outreach Coordinator at Rainforest Connection. Carly's currently finishing a PhD with a dissertation on passive acoustic monitoring and machine learning, creating a pipeline to survey the critically endangered black and white ruffed lemur across their fragmented range in southeastern Madagascar. Hi, Carly.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
Awesome. Before we jump into your presentation, it would be great to hear a little bit more from you about your STEM journey. So what brought you to where you are today? Did you always know you wanted to be an acoustic ecologist, or is this a career path that developed over time for you? And also, how did you decide to take on the monumental task of pursuing a PhD?
Yeah, so no, this was definitely not the life plan. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a veterinarian because so the common thread is the love for animals remaining. But I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I went to college for as a pre-vet major. Realized I wasn't as interested in the medicine aspect, was much more kind of interested in the behavior aspect. And then I really liked wildlife. So then I thought maybe I'll be a wildlife veterinarian for a while. And that was the next kind of kick that I was on. And then kind of decided to just take the veterinarian part out entirely and stick with wildlife. So I kind of the turning point of that was I interned at a wildlife rehabilitation center in Belize in Central America during college, and it was amazing. We cared for manatees who were orphaned because their moms got hit by boats, and we rehabbed them and re-released them into the wild. They had some animals that had been confiscated from the illegal pet trade. And so that was kind of my first field experience with wildlife. And I really fell in love and got exposed to kind of the plight of so many species around the world whose populations are declining because of the actions of us humans. So that got me more steered towards a kind of wildlife conservation journey. And that's what I did my master's and then my PhD in. The PhD is a lot. It's just an incredible amount of work, but I'm proud of the project I did. And I'm going to mention a bit about that today later in the talk. And that's kind of what got me to this was how are we able to conserve wildlife? Well, we need to be able to survey for wildlife in the environment, and what are efficient and new innovative ways to do that. Is really utilizing different technologies like motion triggered cameras that you put out in your backyard to get your raccoons and possums. And what I then specialized in, which is the acoustic recorders. So listening to the sounds of the environment to get insights about what animals are out there.
That's awesome. That's also quite the journey. I know I work in the wildlife conservation space now, and at some point I also had vet on my potential career path. And, as I figured out what else was out there, kind of refined that into something that fits really well with what I'm passionate about. And now I know everyone is probably itching to hear more about your project and your research and where you've been able to travel and, what you found. So while we go through, for our audience, if you have any questions for Carly, please add those to the chat and we will talk about them and answer them at the end during our discussion. And Carly, if you would like to share your slides, we can go through with that presentation. And I'll give a couple more heads up to all of our audience. We do have some interactive questions for you during this presentation. So get ready to type in your answers in the comments when Carly asks you some of those questions.
Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes, fantastic.
Cool, perfect. Apologies for the dog barking outside if you can hear that. Just another example of the things we can learn from animal sounds. So yeah, what I want to focus on kind of is what I briefly touched on at the end there of how we can use sound to conserve wildlife. So how can we listen to the natural symphony of the wildlife around us and be able to understand what's influencing different animals in different spaces? So why is sound important? Well, there's probably a lot of animals that that vocalize. So if you want to pop them into the comment section here, you can, so we can get some examples. And while you're thinking about that, and to kind of start you on inspiring you on all of the animals that make sound, I'm gonna play a clip of animals calling, and I'll show you what's called a spectrogram. So that's just a really fancy word for a visual image of sound, basically. So it looks something like this, which might look like absolutely nothing. But if you imagine on the horizontal axis, it's showing over time, so the number of seconds. And then on the vertical axis, it is the pitch of the sound. So whether it's really high pitched like this or really low pitched like this, that's the pitch of a sound. So, and then the color is how loud the sound is. So it might be a darker color if the animal is calling really loudly or is really close to the microphone, right? So as you're listening to the clip, see if you can pick up on what calls you see in this image, what patterns you see as you're listening. So that really low kind of roar, like roar, roar at the bottom, that's this here at the bottom. And then you heard lots of like high-pitched sounds like doo, 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 doo. That's these, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but is my cursor showing up or no?
Yes.
Okay, cool, perfect. Is these descending notes here, like doo, 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 doo. So as kind of a guess, any ideas how many different animals you think are calling in this clip? So I'll just give a break for people and for those watching the recording after to guess as I play it. So as a quick answer here. This is just some of the animals that we're calling during that recording. And you can see it's a lot of different types of animals, right? There are birds that are calling, there are insects like crickets and cicadas. There are mammals like monkeys. That's a howler monkey that has that really low, was doing that really low voice. So there's lots of different animals all calling just in, this 1 minute. And this was actually taken in Panama, in a country in Central America. So a bit far from us, but that is from the rainforests of Panama. So all of these animals we know are at this site that we put up the recorder and the microphone. And to kind of see how good your guessing is, I'm going to play a couple more of those calls with showing the spectrogram, right? That visual image of sound. And you all can guess, try to guess if you know what the animal is that is calling. So here's the first one. Right. I'll play it one more time.
And we'll see if anyone has any guesses. They were pretty good at guessing the number on the last slide. We had ranged between 3 and 12. So pretty close on the high end there.
Amazing. Love that. All right, cool. Any guesses for?
None that have come in yet.
I'll just give it one more play. And as a hint, it is an animal that lives underwater.
That is an excellent hint.
So this one, it is a beluga whale. So they have these clicks that you can see here that they use to communicate underwater when they're swimming around. All right, next example. Give it a second. Play it again.
And if you could give us another hint on this one,
Yeah,
taxa or location or something, that might be helpful. We
this
have one guess
is.
so far of Cotamundi.
Oh, that is a good guess. It is a flying animal.
All right. So Cody is unfortunately not right.
Whoops, I accidentally pressed the next button, but
That is okay.
all right. So I kind of gave it away because I accidentally hit the arrow, but this is a type of bird called a tanager, which makes these very, very high-pitched calls. So that was a tanager. Next one is also under the water. It's a very weird one. I'll play it again. Give a minute.
We don't have any guesses on this one yet. This one is hard.
It is. And it shocks literally everyone. But this is actually a type of fish called a toadfish that kind of looks somewhat demonic in this picture, but it's a type of toadfish, and they produce these kind of like vibrations. So fish make sounds too, not an animal typically you would think. All right. Second to last one. Kind of a quick one, so I'll play it a couple times. And this is we're back on land for this one.
We have a couple of guesses of boar.
Good guesses. It's something that might eat boar.
Have a lion guess and a tapir guess.
Nice. The lion was getting very warm. Any final thoughts from very close to a lion? It is.
We have a refined guess for a tiger now, but big cat of some sort, probably.
Yes, it's a jaguar.
Excellent.
So yes, good job. That was, they were all very right in the ballpark. And then the last one, we are going back to the air. So this is a flying animal. Play it again.
We have insect of some sort and mosquito coming in as guesses now.
Those are great guesses. It is an insect of some sort. It's not a mosquito, but it is an insect. Any other insect guesses?
A bee, perhaps?
Not a bee, but we are getting closer.
All right. And our next guess is a beetle.
A beetle. We've got to go a little bit smaller than a beetle. So this is actually a fruit fly with a very tiny microphone right on the fruit fly. So that's what it sounds like when you just hear that little buzz in your head. This is what it sounds like really close up. So that's a fruit fly. And so kind of just to bring this a bit larger on like why sound is helpful for us, is that lots of different animals make vocalizations. They make calls for communication and to warn about predators. So there's lots of animals that produce sound. And they produce sound in these very distinct patterns, right? That you can see on those spectrograms, on those visual images of sound. So we're able to identify what species is calling based on the pattern that we see in the sound. So it's a way to detect species, detect wildlife without actually needing to be out there yourself. And this can be good because if you're in a dense rainforest here, like I was in Madagascar, it's very hard to see what is in those trees, right? Because there's lots of leaves and bushes blocking your view. It's very foggy and cloudy, but with sound travels through that. So even animals that you can't visually see, you can hear. So it's a really effective way of surveying for different animals. And it's also good because you can put up recorders out into the environment, and they can run on their own. So you just go in and you put them up and you press play, and it records all of the sounds so that you don't, as a scientist, have to then go out at night when you probably want to sleep, or during bad weather, like if it's a thunderstorm, and the recorders will be recording for you. So it's really good kind of over space and over time to survey wildlife and biodiversity. So how do we do that? Well, I mentioned these recorders that you can put up into the environment. These are some examples of ones that you can, of microphones and recorders that you can hold yourself as you're going through the forest. So this is me in Madagascar. And then there are also devices that you can put up, like you wrap them around a tree and they'll record on their own. So two different kinds of recorders, the ones that you record yourselves and the ones that you put up to record on their own. And they're quite small and cheap, so you can carry a lot of them in your bag and deploy them out into the environment to survey the wildlife in your area. And to give you an example from my own personal experiences, I'll talk about my dissertation project, which used this sound monitoring, what we also call acoustic monitoring, to survey an endangered lemur in the country that lemurs are native to. Does anyone know what the only country that lemurs are found in? Give it a minute to sink.
We have a Madagascar guess.
That is correct. The movie title kind of gives it away. So lemurs are native to Madagascar, which is an island off the east coast of Africa here, and it's very big. It's the 4th largest island in the world, so it's only behind Greenland up here, which is obviously very big, and then Borneo and Papua New Guinea here. So Madagascar is kind of like, you could fit like 2 Californias inside of it. And it has lots of these lemur species. Are there any guesses for how many species of lemur there are in total in Madagascar? How many different kinds of lemurs do you think there are? And it's not the number of pictures that are on the screen if you're about to start counting those. It's more.
Exactly what I was about to do.
It's more.
We have a guess of 58 and a guess of 30.
We got to go up.
And a guess of 100.
100's closer. Still got to keep going up a little bit.
$111. 120.
That is very, very good and very accurate. There are about 110 different kinds of lemurs that are all native and only found on the island of Madagascar. And I focused for my PhD for graduate school on one of those 110, which are the ruffed lemurs. So there's 2 species of ruffed lemurs. I focused on the black and white ones here, but they live in the east of Madagascar here, where it's very forested. It's all kind of tropical rainforest. And it might look like they have a pretty big distribution here, but it's really, really fragmented. So there's lots of forests that are surrounded by like farmland and rice paddies. So there's kind of competition between humans and wildlife over land. And because it's an island, right, there's a fixed amount of land to be used. But the ruffed lemurs are really important because they are actually really key seed dispersers and pollinators. So usually when you think of pollinators, you think of like bees and birds. But actually the ruffed lemurs, because they have this kind of beard that you can see around their face, when they stick their face into a flower to drink the nectar, all of it gets caught, all of the pollen gets caught in their beard, and then they run along to a different flower and stick their face in that, and that's how they actually help pollinate these trees. So they're really important for the overall ecosystem. They're a keystone species, really, in these areas. And they have really cute babies. They actually, kind of like a dog or a cat, have litters of babies. So anywhere from 1 to 4 babies in one litter, which is pretty rare for primates, right? So monkeys and apes, like our closest cousins, usually just have one baby. If you think of like chimpanzees and gorillas or baboons. But the ruffed lemurs are a bit weird because they don't have just one. They usually have these litters. So really interesting reproductive species. And as I said, I studied their vocalizations. So of course I have to play you some of their calls. So this is one of their calls. And they just keep going on and on like that for like a minute. It's actually multiple lemurs calling at once. So they're chorusing together. And it's kind of an instant thing. So once one lemur starts calling, then all the rest of the individuals in the group also start calling as well. And so you get this really loud chorus of the whole group calling. And these calls are very loud, so they're very easy to detect from a long way away. And that kind of makes this lemur species perfect for acoustic monitoring, for sound monitoring. So I was in a particular area in the southeast of the island of Madagascar, down here in this forest corridor. So you can see the dark green that's coming through here, the very thin dark green strip, is what's left of the primary forest. This whole area used to be forested, but there's been a lot of habitat loss and cutting down trees. So the forests have been lost, and we actually don't really know where the lemurs are within these forests. They're very, like I said, kind of fragmented. There's lots of agricultural land intermixed with the forest. So we were trying to use sound and put up these recorders at sites all along this, this corridor here. So all of these little purple dots here are where I put up one of those acoustic recorders so that we could see where did we detect lemurs. And we kind of found that there's an abrupt cutoff, and they're only found in the top half of the corridor. So they're only found at sites that have the blue dots here. And they're not found at all down in the south area here. So there's kind of this really abrupt cutoff. And we're not really sure why they don't come down. It might be that there's a lot of there's like a band of kind of deforestation that's just agricultural land that's preventing them from crossing because they don't like to come to the ground, right? They're high canopy, they live way at the tops of the trees, and they really don't like coming to the ground. They just jump from tree to tree from the branches. So if there's a big gap because there's, a farm, then they're not able to cross over. And that might be what's happening here and what's preventing them from moving down, from moving south. So while I was there, doing all of this work and putting all of those recorders up, this was home. So we were camping in the woods, which is great, completely off the grid, no cell phones or Wi-Fi or anything like that. So, which might be hard for some of you to believe, but it's actually very nice to kind of get unplugged from the world for a bit and just enjoy this really amazing natural world that we have around us. So this was what some of our campsites looked like in the tropical forests in Madagascar. And I was super, super lucky to be working with local Malagasy people. So people from Madagascar are called Malagasy, like people from the United States are called American. So I worked with a lot of local Malagasy researchers and field technicians who helped me do all of this amazing research, and they're really kind of the stars of the show here. So if you want to impress all of your friends, I'll give you some language tips. Malagasy is also the name of the language. So if you want to say hello in Malagasy, you say salama. So salama is hello. And if you want to say goodbye, then you say veluma. So hello is salama and goodbye is veluma. So that's your an extra Malagasy lesson to tag on. So that's a brief overview of what I did for my dissertation and kind of an example of the power of using sound to detect wildlife in a really efficient way without needing people always on the ground following them to try to find them, which takes a lot of time. It's very expensive. It takes a lot of people to do it. Whereas these recorders kind of acted like a bunch of different people standing in each of these sites at the same time to record all of the sounds that are there. So that's kind of the power of using sound in conservation. And I would encourage, if you're interested in kind of getting into learning more about what kinds of crazy sounds that animals make, I will pop some links into the chat that have where you can kind of explore more animal calls. And I'm happy to take any questions as well, of course.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Carly. This is so cool. And we have a comment in the chat about how cool this research is. And so, yeah, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat and I can ask Carly as we're going through here. I have a couple to start with. And so the first one is just, you mentioned at the end there, the collaboration of all of the Malagasy people and their research, that you were, working with their teams and their research institutions. And I know you just had a research paper come out. And so one of those questions that we want to talk to students about is how much time and collaboration goes into, publishing your research. And, after you've been out there and you've put all of your recorders out there and you've figured out what you've recorded and where the lemurs are, then that next step of writing it all up and publishing it, how much time and effort and how many people are involved in something like that?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. And it's really kind of especially important to make sure that that work is also accessible to the people that you're working alongside, right? So all of the people and in Madagascar who I was working with, we were working alongside a lot of indigenous communities, a lot who live alongside the forest, and especially kind of coming in as someone from the global north, I was very cognizant of the fact of kind of the privilege that I had, and wanted to make sure that these results were also kind of given back to the communities. So all of the results are back with the Madagascar Parks Authority. And the government departments there, who can use that information for kind of on the ground action and policy to kind of make sure that these results are informing what's happening on the ground, and not just, being published in a fancy paper that like no one gets to see ever, and it's super scientific jargony language. And yeah, so that is it is important, but I really kind of focus even more so on making sure that those results are coming back to the folks on the ground.
Yeah, that's great. We have a couple of questions coming in from our audience, and I'll start with this one, which is cargo shipping and other, human-produced noise are significantly impacting ocean wildlife as well as a lot of our terrestrial wildlife. What lessons can we take from, your research in the tops of the trees to understand how noise impacts some of our other life on this planet?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, right, there's lots of animals that live underwater that you can also do this acoustic monitoring with. So there's special underwater microphones called hydrophones that you can put out in the ocean or a river or a lake, to be able to do this same kind of detection work with species like whales and dolphins and fish. So there's and it really is just as much of a problem with obviously vessel noise below the water, and then things above the water like airplanes and vehicles and things like that. There are studies that have found that songbirds actually shift the pitch that they sing at in noisier environments. So we're kind of directly impacting their natural biology. And so there's a couple examples of, particularly in the ocean space, of kind of initiatives that are both to drive, kind of avoid like shipping hits, like ships actually hitting whales, as well as the noise that the ships are producing. So there are in some cases, there are these stationary hydrophones in shipping lanes that are specifically tuned to detect, using statistical models, AI models, particular species, so that if a whale calls in that lane and it's picked up by the microphone, an automatic alert goes out to all the boats and ships in the region that tells them that there's an endangered whale that just came in. You have to lower your speed, which lowers the noise. It lessens the likelihood of ship hits. And that's kind of, it's an early warning system almost, of using the sound detections to actually impact the human activity itself in an adaptive way. So obviously, shipping is an inevitable kind of pillar of our economy. We can't just say like it needs to stop now, as much as we want to. So it's really kind of finding that balance of like, okay, the ships can go through here, but like they have to lower their speed when this species is detected, and there's using sound. We know when the species is in that area, And so we can alert the captains. Yeah, so just one kind of example of work that they're doing to mitigate all of that.
That's awesome. And while we're on the topic of underwater sound and also AI, I know a lot of our teachers and students might be familiar with some artificial intelligence like ChatGPT, which is, widely used publicly now and can be helpful for a great many tools. How does AI help you in your work? I know I was thinking when you played that toadfish sound, I was like, this could be a ship, like a shipwreck creaking. How do you know that something is an animal, and how do you distinguish, I don't know how many toadfish there are. Does that toadfish sound kind of pretty similar to another toadfish? And is that where you can use AI to help you distinguish what you're hearing?
Yeah, exactly. So to do the actual detections, the analyses that we use are these artificial intelligence languages. So similarly, ChatGPT is kind of a super advanced example of it. What we do for the models to detect the animals from sound, different wildlife species tend to have a particular call type that's unique to that species, so you can reliably detect that call. And if you generate enough examples of that call that you can feed into one of these models, the computer learns those examples how to identify different species, and that's what it uses to kind of predict what species are in new data. So you're going through and saying manually, the human is saying, like, this is a toadfish, this is not, this is a whale, through a couple examples. And then you give those examples to the computer. And the computer can pull out different patterns that distinguish those species specific calls, the calls that are unique to a particular animal species. And it's able to learn then from that how to distinguish them in a very quick way. So what used to take, literal years for a human to do, can now take a computer, a couple hours. And so it's really, really improving the way that we're able to process all of this data. Because if you imagine, right, like if these recorders are running all the time and you have 100 of them out, that's like a ton of data, millions of minutes of recordings, years of recordings, from around the world. That's a lot of data, and it literally is impossible for a human to manually go through all of it. And so we have to use AI just to process the immense amount of data that we're getting from sound, and it's become kind of integral to the whole pipeline of detecting species from sound.
That's awesome and very fascinating. And it sounds really, really complicated. So, my next question for you is what skills have really helped you in your research and in your career? And is there anything you wish you knew or had, started learning earlier? A lot of our students might be thinking that this sounds really cool and maybe they want to pursue a career or take a class or something like that. So yeah, any advice?
Yeah. Particularly if you're doing field work or going out to these places, definitely expect for things to go wrong, because it just kind of always seems to. So for example, like in Madagascar, I was like, oh, I know on the map, like I want to put a recorder here, here, and here. But one site we went to, there was a big river and a storm had come through and blown the bridge away. So we couldn't get across. To which my response was, well, let's just swim. and my Malagasy guides informed me that there are crocodiles in the water, so we weren't going to swim. And so there was not a recorder that was going to be placed over there because we had no way of getting across this very raging river full of crocodiles. So, that's kind of just being able to be flexible, kind of adapt to situations like that. Say like, okay, can't put a recorder over here. Let's instead put it over here, or, just kind of being able to be flexible in situations that you just kind of inevitably will not have full control over, particularly if you're, off the grid and you're far from a road and things like that. So I think in field research and just generally in life, it's good to be flexible and kind of adaptive to your situations. So would highly recommend that. I would definitely tell myself that a lot looking back. And the other thing is kind of just the best way to figure out if you like to do something, and the way that I kind of got on my career path at all is really through action, through doing it. It's, usually stuff outside of the classroom that's just as important as what's in the classroom. I'm not going to minimize to any of the teachers on the importance of the classroom. Fully understand, very important. But if something sparks your interest in a class, right, like try to do it. So like you can go onto the website that I showed, has like a huge library of species calls. And so you can look and see like, oh, I don't know, what does like a jackal sound like, or what does an elephant sound like? And you can look through and kind of explore and get into that kind of thing more. There's some apps that you can download on your phone, particularly for birds. There's one called Merlin from Merlin Sound ID. So it's really just kind of it's that kind of experience of just getting your hands dirty and trying new things. It was the internship I did way back in Belize during college that made me realize how much I loved wildlife and conservation. And so I would just urge everyone to be open to those kinds of new experiences that don't seem like what you should be doing given a certain path, and welcome kind of those experiences, because you never know what's going to spark your interest, and it's always good to have some experience to see if it's something you actually like or not.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know that a lot of those apps, especially for birds, but some of the others also double as a community science project. And so if you have anything to say about that and how students can even get involved in this research now, that would be cool.
Absolutely. So while there, I put the actual link to Merlin. Yeah, so there's a huge kind of community around this type of nature watching, from visual, like photos, as well as sound and audio. So, for example, Merlin is built around the eBird community, which is like a community of thousands of people from around the world who, they don't have to be scientists. They're, bankers, doctors, like whoever, but they just like birds and they like seeing what's out just in their own backyard. Sometimes we forget, I think, particularly if you're, in like a suburb or an urban area, we kind of forget that there is nature still around us, if we're kind of open to looking. So even just seeing what's in your own backyard, like iNaturalist, eBird, etc. This is all kind of built around this community of people who love to see what is around them. And it's those kinds of apps still feed into scientific research. So there's lots of scientists who use the data that all of these community members are putting on iNaturalist and eBird and using it for science, for these big scientific studies to assess how species ranges are changing, particularly with the climate changing in such drastic ways. So even you know, at home can download a phone app and just say, I heard this bird here, and you'll be actively contributing to ongoing scientific studies.
That's awesome. I love that, and I love using all of those too. I have one last kind of fun question for you, although my example and answer to this is less fun, so I'll go first. But we have a question about what sound you most want to hear. And for me, this is a really fun question because I was actually on a webinar this morning, and the CEO of Zoos Victoria played a clip of the last Christmas Island pipistrelle, which is a bat, ever recorded. And that was a sound that I didn't even know existed, but it's the last time that species was recorded before it went extinct. And so that was a really, like, you know, deep and emotional sound for me to hear. And that wasn't something that I recorded or, you know, was there or anything, but that was a sound that I didn't even know existed. So if there's a species or a sound that you would most like to record or hear, you know, what is that? Or also, if you have the most fun or interesting call that you've heard from a species, that would be fun too.
Well, it depends on what you like, what you think of as interesting. I get a crazy call is the Tasmanian devil has a pretty crazy call that sounds like something's being choked while it dies or something. But like, yeah, they have a pretty crazy call. So if you want to look up a Tasmanian devil vocalization, just keep your microphone down because it's pretty loud. And I have it right, like a lot of these, I would love to be able to like record these species in the wild. I haven't made it to Tasmania yet, so I would love to be able to like hear that in real life, just because there's something about like being immersed in the sound that when it's like kind of amplified in the environment, that's just kind of, as I was playing you like the ruffed lemur call, like it sounds so muted compared to when you're in the forest and like 7 different lemurs are screaming at this. So I would definitely like, it's kind of a unique experience to hear it in the wild than to hear a recording of it. So that's probably one. There's a lot of cool stuff in Australia that makes weird noises. Koalas bellow, like the males have these really low, like, so that would be cool. Lots of cool sound making things around Australia that I'd probably like to hear. And one that I had just heard about because I just saw a paper is that you can tell what type of piranha it is from their sound. So apparently now piranhas make noise, and that was literally like something I saw this morning, and now I'm like, tell me all about piranha vocalizations. Like what? So yeah, it's just super cool to be discovering all of these sounds that we didn't even know, or sounds that, you know, we're recording for the first time, for the last time, right? We don't know when and if these species are going to go extinct. You know, their calls might be the last thing we have of them if we don't kind of take drastic action to reverse our human activities. So it's a really like evocative kind of an emotional way of connecting to back to nature, and good for, you know, mental health, physical health. There's studies that have even shown just like forest bathing, kind of going out in a forest and listening, it like literally calms your mind. So there's just a lot that I think this sound can do for us in helping animals and helping ourselves, in connecting ourselves back to the natural world around us.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure all of the students either watching live with us now or revisiting the recording have learned a ton about the potential for bioacoustics in wildlife conservation or in their potential careers. And I also want to give a special thank you to our Headwaters community who always come out for all of our engaging live events and ask such fantastic questions and engage with everything. And so also a shout out and thank you to everyone who's been donating today as part of our Giving Tuesday campaign. We really couldn't do what we do without you. And so whether you have a passion for STEM education or expanding access to hands-on science opportunities or see the value in professional mentorship, we really thank you for supporting our mission to foster curiosity through science. And we do have matching donations today, and so the first $10,000 of our goal will be matched by our generous donors. So if you can and would like to support us, you can text or find the link in the chat. So Carly, thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing more of your work in the future. Everyone can learn about Carly and the Rainforest Connection and bioacoustics when this episode of Lunch with a Scientist goes live to our website, and we'll have the compatible student investigation and share all of these links and resources again there. So thank you so much.
Bye.